I said, I'm going to question everything that's ever been taught to me about relationships.
It was all very familiar, but genius, if you believe it.
20 years ago, an attempt to help the sexes understand one another caught a lot of attention and even more sales.
So while Men Are From Mars was, on the top of the charts, for the first 5 years, I never received one positive print interview.
Deciphering the minds of men and women remains a desperate business.
I just need you to listen to me and give me a hug.
She's actually clever enough to say those words.
Are we any wiser nowadays?
Totally.
I'm Anne-Marie McDonald. DocZone is looking at Mars and Venus today.
I started getting interested in girls at seriously getting interested in girls at grade 6.
She was just so confident and incredibly sexy. I mean, she had me. You had me at hello.
You think they're pretty, you love their laugh. If you like that girl, that's just how you feel about her.
49 years, we're married this year.
I believe that when I think about it, that we've been together that long.
Yeah, it just seems like 2 or 3 weeks. So,
Love. When it's good, it's good.
It's one of the most powerful brain systems on earth, romantic love. We live for love, we kill for love, and we die for love.
But it's not all hearts and flowers. Sometimes it's a battle of the sexes.
He never asks for directions. Really drives me crazy.
We can sometimes bicker about if it's like family dynamics, but with my mom, or you can't really say anything about her dad.
My dad is, yeah.
Don't touch the dad subject.
Kind of bothers me about Candace, I would say, probably is she's definitely a nag.
The way some couples talk these days, you'd almost think men and women were from different planets. Not so surprising, really, considering that 20 years ago, with the force of a meteorite, a remarkable phenomenon landed on Earth and changed our universe. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. So how are the planets aligning today? Back in 1992, Madonna was strutting her stuff. A princess decided she had had enough of Prince Charming. TV's Murphy Brown dared to have a baby on her own. And the old male guard gave way to Canada's first female prime minister. It was all about equality between the sexes. The idea that men and women were the same. Then along came a little-known marriage counselor from California who turned conventional wisdom upside down with a rather simple idea.
To improve communication, it's essential that we understand how men and women communicate different.
To John Gray, men and women aren't the same. In fact, they're from different planets, and that's why they can't communicate.
I could have told you that.
In the early stages of developing the ideas of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, I was a marriage counselor. I kept seeing that men and women were misinterpreting each other. And that was after I'd seen the movie E.T. back in the early 80s. I was giving a talk and I just said to the women in the audience, imagine your husband's E.T. And they all laughed, it just lightened up. And then some woman says, where's my husband from? And I said, Mars. And I said, this was the answer to a prayer. And I had little goosebumps all over my body. I went, yes, this is it.
And it was. Gray's central idea that men and women are fundamentally different may have been politically incorrect, but it sure proved popular. 20 years and 15 million copies later, Mars and Venus has become the best-selling relationship book of all time.
John Gray sold millions of books for several reasons. One is people want answers. We want to be able to make sense of the world. And it's much easier if you can make sense of the world in one little catchphrase, we're from different planets.
The irony is, while Men Are From Mars was, on the top of the charts for 6 years, for the first 5 years, I never received one positive print interview. It's the old story of you bring out a new idea, first they ridicule it, they get mad at you, and then they think, oh, anybody could have come up with it.
It was all very familiar, but he had the package to kind of put it together into something that was very marketable to the culture at that time. Because other people had written the same thing, but they hadn't been so successful with it. And John Gray comes along and he's the one who succeeds. Genius, if you believe it.
But Mars Venus is more than just a catchphrase. It's become a cultural phenomenon, one that's been debated and refuted, but still has enormous appeal to couples seeking advice.
I don't know why reading a book by some guru who's got a load of slogans does help.
So after 2 decades of social change and scientific discoveries, do these slogans still make sense? Are the planets any closer together?
Relationships are so complicated today. They're so complicated. The only way we can make them better, and we can, is to have harmony between men and women.
Some people think that John Gray's book in 1992 was a little too simple. But one of the problems with getting a message out is you have to make it simple. And if it's too complicated, people won't do it.
And all of a sudden, men were like, okay, so I'm not abnormal. This is just, we are different.
Gray's motivation for writing Mars and Venus lay in personal failure. When his first marriage ended in divorce, he realized if he was going to help others, he had to get his own house in order.
I said, I'm going to question everything that's ever been taught to me about relationships.
Then John met Bonnie. They've been married for 27 years.
I had to go through a failed marriage to become ready. And I realized that's the path for many people today. And from there, I began to develop, with the help of Bonnie, the whole message of men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Well, it really is true that sometimes it's like we're speaking different languages. We're coming from different planets. We misunderstand each other. He's saying this, she's hearing that.
And Gray understood the power of a marketable message. People clamored to hear his planetary yarn about Martians and Venusians.
What we have to know is that our instincts are built in.
To his critics, he was trotting out the same old stereotypes. But to many couples, it rang true.
Our reasons for communicating are different. Now, men don't know this because they have particularly one way to communicate, and that is communicating to make a point.
Gray broke it down into a few simple descriptions of male and female behavior. For example, men want to fix things and come up with quick solutions.
Men are Mr. Fix-It. He's trying to solve her problem rather than just simply listening to what she's going through. And a man goes, but what's the point of that? He doesn't instinctively realize what a value that would be to her.
I need to talk to you about something, and I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen to me and give me a hug.
She's actually clever enough to say those words.
For millions of years, men's major job on this planet was to help women. By defending them, by providing for them, but listening to them is not as natural to men as it is to women.
Women need to talk in intimate relationships as a way to get closer.
You know, I realize she's upset and I go to her and talk to her, but it tends to be her kind of leading me through the what's wrong and what can be done about it, to be perfectly honest. You know, I think I'm not too bad at it because I've kind of learned how, but it doesn't come easily. Like, it's hard.
John Gray's rules of relationships make great comic fodder. Vancouver's Chris Molyneux and Nicole Oliver have made a living at it.
You know, the biggest complaint that my husband has is that I talk to him like he's an idiot. Now, whose fault is that?
My wife talks so much, even the dog knows how to cover his ears.
For me, I just really feel...
And Gray says men need to learn to listen.
So I teach men, if she's talking, make sure to look in her direction. It makes a big difference for her.
I've had to learn just to sit back and just kind of chill. And because if you try to break that process, then you're in for like some serious like whoop ass. Because, you know, like if you ever want to get in an argument with a woman, have her try to explain exactly what she's feeling in that moment. Because it won't happen.
So then, like, my mother called me again, and she wants to come visit, but you know, every time she comes, I get so anxious, right? And I really need you just to hear what I'm saying.
men also stop talking as a way to cope with stress. So one of the easiest ways for a man to cope with stress is to become quiet for a while.
According to Gray, men are just like their Neanderthal ancestors. They need to retreat to their caves.
We all have our ways as men, if we're coping well with stress, to pull away from the world.
The way that I figured out that Peter needed some downtime after work was he would call me and he would be in a store somewhere and I would say, "Are you finished work?" And he'd say, "Yeah." I'd say, "When did you finish?" He'd go, "Oh, an hour ago." And this was consistent that he wouldn't come home right after work.
It was quiet time.
And I figured it out. I said, "Wait a second, this is your quiet time."
The reality is men always had man caves. It was just now I've given a name to it. You know, before it was the newspaper. He put the newspaper up. And it was just a way for a man to back off, be in his own world for a while, center himself, and forget the problems of his day. And then he starts to feel like he wants to join back in with the family.
He's thinking, she'll tell me if she wants something and she'll...
But while men look inward, Gray says women deal with stress by talking a lot to each other.
I know better at this point in 10 years of marriage to look at my husband to fill all these gaps. It's not going to happen. It's unrealistic and it's unfair to put that kind of pressure on one person.
Yeah, women want to talk about it. Men want to pretend like it doesn't exist until it's too late, generally. And then there's that big blow up and then they get it.
Really, I should express that, yes, this is what I should be saying. And
if she can talk to somebody who actually listens to what she's experiencing in her life and is nodding their head going, yes, oh, a little empathy, a little understanding, she starts to feel connected. She's able to share what's going on inside and she feels better.
And then I won't have that disappointment, right?
Book clubs, okay? Do they have anything to do with books at all? No, I don't think so. The only problem is every time there's a book club thing, I'm thinking, are they talking about me?
Women feel loved when you see them, when you touch them, when you hear them, when you honor them, when you support them in that way. Men feel most loved when what they do is valued and appreciated. So we're like a perfect fit.
There was a very romantic thing Peter told me a few years ago. He said, every morning when I wake up, I think, how can I make Anne-Marie's life a little bit better or easier today?
But I get a lot of gratification from that. I realize, and John Gray described that in his book and in his lectures. He said, I did that, I made that happen. I created that happiness or that smile or that laugh.
And men love appreciation.
I sure do. I love being appreciated.
I'm telling you from years of experience as a marriage therapist, men's #1 reason for leaving women is nothing I do makes her happy. But for every little upset, there is a different skill, a different tool to apply.
I think it just made me realize, okay, maybe I should approach the situation in a slightly different manner so that, he would be more receptive towards it. Just teaching you a modified way to speak or communicate.
Once you start understanding the differences between men and women, then suddenly the answers make sense. And now we have this sort of modern illusion that we're the same. That makes it even worse.
I think John Gray's Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus started a great conversation. It seemed to answer some questions. Like, why does my dad always get up and walk out of the room when we're talking about anything emotional? And how come my boyfriend likes to go away and shut the door?
Women are much more verbal because women were the baby raisers.
I have the bluest eyes. I have the bluest eyes.
For millions of years, women had to hold that baby in front of their face, cajoling them, reprimanding them, educating them with words. Words were women's tools.
Women really talk more about feelings, and men talk about situations.
I just really think that we're not brought up to that. I know whether it's innate or not, I don't know. But I mean, I never talked about any relationships when I was a kid. I don't feel like I have the words.
I've traveled around the world 18 times going to indigenous cultures, looking at how men and women have figured out how to behave in harmony for thousands and thousands of years. And the way they did it was there was men's work and there was women's work. And it's the same everywhere. Women do the nurturing things, the men do the dangerous stuff, the emergency stuff, and the project stuff. When the sun sets, men are sitting around doing nothing, and they don't talk much. Women are busy talking the whole time.
But is it really that simple? According to Oxford linguist Deborah Cameron, 2 decades of research proves that Gray's claims are pure myth.
You know, gender is part of identity, and so you'll find wherever you go that there will be some differences between women and men, but there's no big difference. There's no men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Okay, but women talk more, right?
Research has shown over and over again that between friends and equals, how much talking there is tends to be quite evenly distributed between the sexes.
They played Most Amazing Encores again and again, and it was at the organ. It was just so much fun. Yes.
You know, all the things that people say, oh, women talk more than men. Not true. Women are more polite and avoid obscene language.
Are you f***ing kidding me? You love I've never heard so much horse in my entire life.
No, not true. People are essentially being told a load of lies about how men and women speak by someone who admittedly doesn't claim to be a scientist. John Gray and other people who write self-help books claim to be basing it on, you know, experience, intuition, what their clients, if they're therapists, have told them. They're not saying this is the scientific truth.
So what does the science say about Mars and Venus? Coming up, perhaps the brain has some answers.
Many studies show that when women are doing a task, more parts of the brain light up than for men.
Falling in love can feel as easy as going barefoot on a beach. But how about staying together? Mars and Venus devotees say John Gray was a guru who rescued their relationships because he understands the differences between men and women. But if his insights were based on gut instinct and intuition, 20 years later, he's facing some challengers.
John Gray's having to contend with new kids on the block now, and the new kids on the block are the neuroscience ones. Neuroscience is the new religion. The brain is to us now what we used to think the soul was, the center of our being and our identity and our individuality.
In the last 2 decades, neuroscience has exploded. Finding sex differences in the brain is a hot new topic, generating media buzz and inspiring a whole new rash of self-help books. But it's a relatively new field, and the scientists themselves don't always agree on the significance of their discoveries.
Nice solid brain here, a little bit of dura. As far as size goes, do you know the size difference between a male and female brain?
No.
Dr. Lise Elliott is a neurobiologist at Chicago Medical School and the author of Pink Brain, Blue Brain, which debunks the notion that male and female brains are significantly different.
One structure we know differs is it's a tiny portion of the tiny hypothalamus. It's the dead center of your brain, and it is responsible for all our basic drives. And the rest of the hypothalamus is this area, and that's, you know, controls thirst and hunger, stress responses, and so on. It's twice as large in human males and has about twice as many neurons as in human females. So there's a difference we know, and it's probably related to sexual performance or sex drive.
As a woman, I can tell you that we use our whole brain. Men, they're kind of stuck in the sex section.
Yeah, actually, that's true.
The other differences between the sexes? Male brains are about 10% larger than female brains, because men are on average 10% bigger. But that doesn't mean they're 10% smarter.
The male brain is a more specialized brain with specific regions dedicated to specific cognitive emotional functions. And then the female brain works more as a total package. Many studies show that when women are doing a task, more parts of the brain light up than for men. But it doesn't mean that one is better than the other.
There's this myth that women are better multitaskers, and there was also a scientific finding for a decade or so that the corpus callosum, which interconnects the two hemispheres of the brain, sits right in the middle and projects from left to right hemisphere. There was an early study that suggested that women have a larger corpus callosum than men. And so that was immediately popularized as the basis for women's advantage in multitasking. But there's not a difference in multitasking, and we now know there's no difference in the corpus callosum.
Multitasking. Figuring out all the stuff that you didn't do, that I now have to do, on top of all the stuff that I usually do. That is the definition, people. Huh?
When my husband gets up early, as he'll get up at the same time as me, and I'll come upstairs, and there will be my darling sitting beside him in her pajamas, talking to him while he eats his cereal, and I come up, and inevitably my first reaction is, well, are you gonna feed the child? There's no kind of flexibility in other people's needs, whereas when I go out the door, I'm doing 50 things, and it's all to get the kids ready for school.
It's just this whole popular Mars-Venus idea that we want to be different, we like to be different, and then construing these fake scientific basis for it.
But scientists do agree that sex hormones influence brain development, and it starts in the womb. Female fetuses secrete estrogen, but it doesn't cross into the brain. At 7 weeks, the male XY chromosome triggers the release of the male sex hormones.
So the testosterone circulates, in the vascular system, ends up in the brain, and differentiates the brain before the baby is even born. So the brain is actually chemically different at birth. Now, some of the earliest differences that have been noticed is something as simple as how female newborns respond to eye contact of the caretaker, whether it's the nurse, the mother, the father, compared to boys. Little girls look much longer at a face than boys do, right from the beginning. And like little boys show much more joy and response when you actually rough and tumble them.
Dr. Whittleson says testosterone also makes boys more aggressive, while girls tend to be risk-averse. She is firmly in the camp of those who believe brain differences matter.
We really are not the same, and everybody knows that. Every mother and father knows that when they've got kids.
I have my first child was a son, and I had a lot of ideas about not putting any kind of gender stereotypes on my kids. And then when Sammy was about 1, he started pointing at vehicles and buses and things that I would never have thought. I was showing him dogs, I was showing him flowers, I was showing him the clouds. It's just been like a complete education for me. I know all about trains, I know all about construction sites, I know all about the difference between a front-end loader and a bulldozer, and I don't know, all this stuff.
Every individual knows that they don't think like their heterosexual spouse or partner.
Okay, what's the difference between a front-end loader and a... You don't really know.
Clearly, when we want to say that men and women are the same, we lose a lot. Equal is good, but same is a lie. It's an illusion. It's blindness.
I don't care what the neuroscience says. Men and women are different. Directions? I asked for them.
So how do we explain these gender differences? Is there really a pink brain and a blue brain?
Come on, Mia. All right, let's go.
Or are we brought up differently? Is it nature or is it nurture?
Coming to live one's gender in a specific way has to do with the way in which you learned to be a man or woman. And the way I explain this to my undergraduates is that, when you are born into the world, you don't have a clue about what it means to be a man or woman.
Neuroscientists came up with this term plasticity to describe the way the brain changes as a result of experience. We start out with very few circuits fixed and wired, but everything else we do with our brains, our verbal skills, our interpersonal emotional regulation is shaped by learning and experience. I guess what I've taken away from the neuroscience of sex difference is that You really are what you do with your brain.
You know where the expression throwing like a girl comes from? Throwing like a girl.
The ability to accurately throw a ball and hit a target is one of the biggest sex differences there is. Bigger than toy choice, bigger than academic skills, because boys engage in play that is more spatial than girls. So pushing trucks around, throwing balls, all these targeting games, video games are wonderful for improving spatial skills. It doesn't mean girls aren't interested, but they're somewhat less interested.
My oldest sons are twins. You know, but I think even before they were two, every stick that they found was a sword or a gun. There was nothing that I could do to change that.
When we apply gender differences, understanding that men and women are different when it comes to raising our children, without a doubt, we see clearly the differences in our children. And some parents say, I'm just going to treat them like there's no difference at all. Okay, no dinosaurs on his T-shirt. He's getting dolls.
What we're saying to our children is, you can opt out of the social experiment of gender if you wish.
Toronto couple Kathy Witterick and David Stalker took gender politics to an extreme when they refused to reveal the sex of their baby, Storm, sparking its own storm of controversy.
In fact, adults are policing an extremely narrow framework of gender and are telling very young children, this is what it's acceptable for you to look like and to act like and to be like based on your physiological characteristics and your categorization. And this is what is not acceptable.
Let's go! Talk and roll it.
They won't get away with it for long. As soon as the child goes to school or hits the real world, they're gonna figure out and probably want to identify with one or the other.
And kids are also exposed to the multi-million-dollar toy industry, which doubles its market by amplifying gender stereotypes. Case in point, Lego.
This young girl had such fun. She used Lego one by one.
Which went from a gender-neutral toy to a boy toy.
We got him.
And now has a new version just for girls, Lego Friends, featuring tall, skinny figures in, what else? Pink.
Children are young and naive, and they believe, that girls are like this and boys are like that. And so the more we reinforce it, the narrower their self-image becomes, the narrower their peer expectations are. So boys expect girls to be one way, girls expect boys to be the other.
Some boys like pink, and girls sometimes say, that's okay if a boy likes pink. Why would I ever like pink? I'm a boy. Girls like pink. Some boys like clear, and girls like clear too. It's a both color.
Critics say slotting girls in pink and boys in blue is just what John Gray has done to men and women. When we return, does Mars and Venus simply reinforce old stereotypes and justify bad behavior?
I'll probably do this. You know I have to do this.
That just kind of becomes an excuse for when men decide that they don't want to listen. It's very convenient for them to be able to say, oh, well, I'm a guy, I'm really no good with that kind of thing. I just leave it to my wife.
A lot's changed in the 20 years since Mars-Venus first exploded onto the scene. Now, gender roles have blurred. More women are breadwinners and more men stay-at-home dads. Everything's up for grabs, from who takes out the garbage to who changes the diapers. But sometimes this role reversal can go just a little too far.
It's all yours. Huh?
Seriously.
Totally. It's a perfect...
We get very upset about racial profiling, for instance, because we know that those assumptions are reductive and simple-minded and often really hurtful. Yet when it comes to gender, this is supposed to be completely okay.
And a whole raft of self-help books reinforce the Mars-Venus stereotypes.
A woman might read one of these books and say to herself, wow, I'm really not a good enough woman. I don't fit this model. I should change my ways because, you know, I don't actually act or think in this way that they tell me that I'm supposed to act and think.
I was offended as a woman and as a feminist. And interestingly, it was the first time I think I'd ever been really offended on behalf of men. I thought that these books were so patronizing to men. I couldn't believe that men weren't making bonfires of them outside the bookstores.
You know, there are these ideas that to be a real man, you always have to be tough, and you have to be strong, and you have to have all the answers, and you can't have any fear. I'm actually insulted by it because a lot of the things that are assumed that I feel or I think or I am because I happen to be a male, I'm not. When we think of books like John Gray's books that assume that we can't really communicate because we're speaking different languages, they give us an out, an excuse not to change. Oh, you know, I don't understand you because I man, you woman, I don't understand. You know, I don't speak your language.
Did you ever notice that in male speak, the word we actually means you? Like, when are we going to iron my shirt? Somehow I don't think he's the one holding the iron. Huh?
It's very convenient for them to be able to say, oh, well, I'm a guy, I'm really no good with that kind of thing. I just leave it to my wife.
Hey, could you take her and put her to bed?
Now? No, I told you. I've got to, I got stuff I have to do. Sorry.
It makes them sound like they're idiots, but it also means there are some quite annoying responsibilities having to do with communication, which they can maybe be absolved from.
You know, you really can't change men. The only time men are interested in change is when there's a vending machine nearby.
I mean, it's as clear as bell. Women are beautiful. Women are emotionally more rich than men are. And, you know, I used to say something like that 30 years ago, and people would say, what? That's politically incorrect. You can't say that. Now we have research showing the emotional part of a woman's brain is twice as large as a man's.
But neuroscientist Lise Elliott begs to differ.
Actually, at birth, boys are the more emotional sex. They fuss and cry, are a little more colicky than girls. It's presumably because boys are less physiologically mature at birth. And then by adolescence, boys are about 40% less likely to cry than girls. We know that social conditioning is a very big part of emotional expression.
The message that we gave to boys from birth is sadly still the message we're giving boys from birth. And that is, you've got to be strong. You've got to be powerful. You better not show too many feelings. You better not cry, and on and on.
I don't try to cry because I guess in a way it makes me feel weak. And I want girls to think I'm strong. Like, I think most of the boys really think like that.
And what this does is it sets boys up for failure because you can't live up to that.
Men and women both have incredibly complicated emotional lives. Men are complicated, men are very confused about romantic relationships, men are just as vulnerable.
You know, sometimes I just want to snuggle into my jammies and eat ice cream and watch The Notebook too. What do you mean when you say men aren't interested in relationships? I think they are. They want to have them. They just don't want to have to talk about it.
Men and women don't really differ in emotionality. We differ in emotional expression, but the internal perception of emotion, how much your heart starts racing or you sweat or in response to a strong evocative stimulus is the same, but women express it more on their faces. And girls, too. Again, very little difference before puberty, but after puberty, boys start putting on the stoic face.
There's so much on us to be perfect males, and we have to be nurturing, we have to be feminine, we have to be masculine. You know, males just can't be like Burt Reynolds anymore with a big hairy chest sitting there and saying something funny, and we have to, there's a lot we got to cover now.
All this blurring of roles has created a lot of confusion for both sexes. Ironically, many of Gray's female clients discovered the only thing worse than not getting what they wanted was getting it.
30 years ago, women came to me in counseling and I said, what's your complaint? He's in his head. He's not in his heart. I want to hear his feelings.
Hey, honey.
You made it? The whole day done? You're all still alive?
Yeah, my feet are killing me.
Pop them up. Pop it up. You're all done. You don't have to worry about anything now.
You get this role reversal where women go to work, they become masculine. The only way he can feel connected to her is to become more feminine.
Oh, honey, that feels good. Oh.
Children are almost under control. They're very
So I
tired.
teach men, get in touch with your feelings, use the I feel hurt phrase, for example. So then women would come back to me literally within a couple of months, every time, and say, I'm just not turned on to him anymore.
I want my husband to be strong. He is strong, manly, to have all those stereotypical fabulous traits that men have.
This is the feminized male. It's not healthy for men.
I'm very sensitive, so I take things to heart sometimes, and I didn't do a good job of sort of recognizing that she's not meaning to hurt me. Those type of conflicts, they happen less.
These roles relate to the fact that we still live in a male-dominated society. We still live in a society in which men make more money than women on average. We still live in a society in which men control most levels of government, in which some religions even say that men are closer to God than women.
The expectation that women will serve and care for those godlike men reinforces their position as the second sex. And it's key to the doctrine of Mars and Venus and all the self-help books that followed.
They keep dragging women back into sort of a 1950s mentality about what it means to be a woman.
Wonderful anniversary, dear, and thank you for the flowers.
You're welcome, darling. But if you could do one thing for me,
What?
try to do something about your coffee.
I hoped it would be better today.
By saying, we're from different planets, we're giving people a big out. You don't really have to change. You don't really have to think about your language, your behavior that is hurtful, that is oppressive.
I may not be able to actually change, but I can pretend to change. And as time goes on, you'll discover that that's pretty much about the same thing.
It's very much the inertia of the old.
Coming up, his critics may say he's mired in the past, but John Gray is still expanding his empire. These days, he's touting hormones in the battle against aging.
But the reality is, even at 25 years old, a man's hormones start decreasing by 1.5% every year.
In the 20 years since his blockbuster success, John Gray has aged along with his audience. Now he tailors his Mars-Venus philosophy to baby boomers like him, anxious about flagging libidos and increasing longevity.
So if you're my age, or any time around my age, you're concerned about hormones. But the reality is, even at 25 years old, a man's hormones start decreasing by 1.5% every year.
His latest book, number 23 in the franchise, is Venus on Fire, Mars on Ice. It's a recipe for love, sexual desire, and healthy aging through the magic of hormones. And it was inspired by his own brief flirtation with retirement.
I figured after I'd written 15 books, why do I need to write another book? People kept saying to me, hey, what are you working so hard for? And I went, yeah, I'll just go on vacation. I almost started to die. My belly got bigger, testosterone levels dropped. I figured after...
Gray's hormonal epiphany set him off on a new mission.
Whenever I compliment her, whenever I notice her, whenever I see her, when I run and give her a hug, guess what hormone gets produced? Oxytocin. Oxytocin then lowers stress levels. How you can stimulate the hormones of...
Did John Gray go away and take a degree in endocrinology while I wasn't watching? Because if he didn't, I strongly suspect that he is not saying anything we ought to take too much notice of.
But Gray's message still sells, and he's expanded his empire to include healthcare products, vitamins, a coaching franchise, and an advice line you can call for $1.99 a minute.
I wasn't laughing all the way to the bank. If you talk to my wife, I've never done this for the money. I really sincerely try to help people in their relationships. And that's why I do it. And that's what keeps me going. The secret here is not give a man what he thinks he wants, because he doesn't know what he really wants.
I suppose some people say they have been helped and, you know, fine, but I think one size doesn't fit all. Your problems are your problems, you know, and they need your solutions.
Layla pretty much goes through life just like throwing clothes on the ground. So I walk around behind her, picking all that stuff up and putting it in the dishwasher and putting it in the dirty clothes basket. And
He thinks he does, but he doesn't actually.
Helen and I operate in different ways, and I think, you know, we complemented each other in a lot of ways. But we do think in a different format. And sometimes, as I say, when I say things, it's not meant the way that Helen takes it, and vice versa.
When we're normally driving and she and I are in the same car, I'm behind the wheel and Anne drives. So.
It's not true.
There is no magic formula. Every human is different, and therefore every relationship between two people is going to be different. There's no way you can write a book that'll work for everybody.
The landscape that men and women live in has changed, and in many fantastic ways.
We still have sort of traditional roles, but we also trade off and we say, I'm too busy, I can't do this, can you help with this? And we, yeah, it's sort of a team effort.
Relationships are getting better because they're more equitable. Kids are growing up in a context where there's an assumption that boys and girls are equally smart, are equally capable, can achieve as much in the world. And this is an amazing change with a huge impact on relationships. We're not stuck on different planets. We get transformed. The landscape changes who we are, how we think, how we behave.
And see, all these people out there spouting that we're all the same, they haven't dealt with people's problems. They haven't solved marriage problems. They don't have a list hundreds of people, thousands of people whose marriages are saved by this insight. They don't have that. They're not dealing with these problems every day.
Ah, love. It's never simple. So what do we really know about the complicated relationship between the sexes? Perhaps it all boils down to this. Even if we are a little bit different, men are from Earth. Women are from Earth. Deal with it. Remember, you can screen our documentaries anytime at cbc.ca/DocZone. I'm Anne Marie McDonald. Thanks for watching.